Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duvall, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who I don't think is going to give me this podcast recording from the milk of human kindness.
Tim Longo. No.
That was terrible.
No, it's good. You got it. Came in at the end there, the accent. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit at the very end. Yeah. I did it better, before I was on the hot mic earlier. But what do you got?
It's really interesting to play because, again, like I said last episode, I haven't played this. We're talking about Bioshock 1, of course. I haven't played this since the first time, and so I haven't played it again. And so, knowing what I know about the story, it's fun to kind of see how they, threaded in
mess with you
specific things. Yeah. But also just sort of like how, Atlas is that his name?
Yeah. Atlas. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How Atlas is talking about Ryan. You know what I mean? Like sort of like the interesting choices of language that I don't know, it's
and he's
messy.
And hearing Ryan in the same way, which we haven't heard much of. I've heard more of because I played a little bit more than you have, and being able to read that two ways in the light of what you know later is another thing. And of course they've also introduced Fontaine as a character, sort of a bête noire in part of it as well, and you have no idea, right? I mean, you're just, it's just like, oh, these people are all dead, right? I mean, all the audio tape people are dead. The people who, the people who call me on the radio are alive, but
who's alive?
Everybody
who's
else
dead?
is right. Yeah, so there's that too. I mean, it's not entirely true. I feel like Peachy maybe has some an audio cassette or two, so that maybe they start to make it clear that those rules aren't written in stone.
Well, Tenenbaum as well, right? Because you hear from her before, and then you meet her,
right?
And then you hear more, and then her voice recordings are obviously from the past, so there's sort of like you see her journey. We'll talk more about the choice her in a second, but
and her later on much more because she's kind of the post Ryan encounter is where you go next, basically. So we'll get to all of that. There's a lot that ties that in with basically World War II, and it's a pretty dark storyline that she comes from. And you kind of have to think about the story a little bit in those terms as well. Is like that this is less than a generation post-war, right? And post-World War II, right? And how disruptive that was to the world, and and why people might be migrating to a place cut away from governments, and there's a whole number of things to think about this. I mean, we talked about how he mentions communism, in the first time you hear Ryan speak, basically, no, says the man in Washington. No, says the man in Moscow, I think. So you get this, this kind of like setting of like, this is the stuff that's at play, forces in the world, in the 50s. So it's interesting.
Yeah. It's also weird to play this for me right now because of some of the schisms happening. I guess, we're not going to get too political on the podcast, but some of the schisms happening in the left and sort of the weird approaches and such to that, and then and then you see sort of like the extreme libertarian sort of view or something here, and then how dark and how terrible it is. And it's sort of like, what kind of, what commentary, how does this work, playing this today, what do you take away from a game with such a strong message about that stuff. So it's messing with my head a little bit there too, but
it's interesting because it's here at the beginning and with Rapture itself, I do feel like it's got a specific message about, objectivism and like how it's fundamentally broken because, of human nature. And, I think it probably might be making a larger argument about how that's true generally. But then, of course, because it's also a hero story, it kind of then goes back against that, right? I mean, so that's something we'll have to talk about more at the end, but I do feel like it's a cautionary tale here at the beginning anyway, and I don't think that it bears that out across the full length of its telling. So
yeah, right, loses the thread on that, or it changes the much like the story does a switcheroo on the messaging for what they're trying to say by the end. And if that's the case, and it's like, ugh,
and that makes it worse. For sure.
So interesting.
It's a very, I mean, I feel like that's been true. I'd say actually Bioshock 2 is probably that is least true of. I mean, there's still this, it's still set in Rapture and all that, and then Infinite, I think, really loses the plot in terms of what it's trying to say. Like that, I don't think that game's themes cohere in any reasonable way. I think it's very lost on what it's trying. I mean, I think it's got some bold statements to say at the beginning, and then anyway, we don't need to, that's not the game we're playing. I might be playing it soon because I'm curious now, God, 8 years on or something, to see it again, but in light of playing this. But anyway, so let's first talk a little bit about the we went to the Medical Pavilion next from last week. I kind of misled, I think, on Twitter. I had said played in Neptune's Bounty because I thought that was next. But what I meant was just play the first big section. And then we go to the Medical Pavilion, which has a number of sort of sub businesses in it. The crematorium and funeral home and the
dentist.
The dentist. Oh my God.
Most frightening dentist in any game ever.
Yes. Yeah. You're pretty frightening. Yeah. And of course, the, literal just, nurses and things like that. You sort of feel like the people here are, were the former medical staff, and now it's all gone horribly wrong. And of course, the big character is Steinman, who ties into one of your themes for topics for the week in minibosses. You want to kind of start diving into that?
Yeah, I think one thing we were talking about in pre-show is just it's a well-constructed game from a step-by-step perspective. It's obviously each section is sort of hub and spokey, or like it's, they're fairly open. You can kind of move back and forth, but it's largely a linear game from a step-by-step perspective. But I think they've done a really good job at doling that stuff out in the right way. And the reason I bring it up in terms of mini bosses is that, Steinman is the big story focus and target for your objective in the Medical Pavilion. And you find audio logs related to him. So they're piecing together who he is and people who have worked for him, etc. You see graffiti written in blood kind of about him. And you kind of see the sort of the mental deconstruction of him through visual environmental storytelling, and the VO and stuff. And then, and then also Atlas has told you need to go get you need a key from him. And so, the key is then related to a character, which is nice. And then you get there eventually and kind of doing a bunch of steps and getting some plasmids and things. And then there's a great introduction. Well, horrifying and problematic, but a introduction of him, which as a side note, they tend to be very good also, like Half-Life, at framing first-person cinematic events in the level design flow, which is very difficult to do well. And but they do a good job here. You come in, there's a window that you have to kind of watch what's happening. You don't have to, but you're just right in front of you, and you see him presented, and he's obviously, you've gotten some clues that he's pretty bad. And then he just starts attacking you, etc. But then he becomes a mini boss, and so there's sort of like a nice culmination, and it feels like the pacing and the sort of crescendo of the Medical Pavilion, works pretty well, because you've associated, you're not just going to get a key, you're going to, ultimately fight this character that has been built up, and you seems pretty bad, so you don't have any problem taking him down, and then he has the key on him. So yeah, it's just good characterization, good connection to the environment, good storytelling along the way, and then the same thing happens in Neptune's bounty with another character, where you meet him and he has you do the thing, and then he becomes the mini boss at the end. And Atlas kind of warns you about Peaches as well, or whatever his name is. So I don't remember if they do that every section or not. I know there's obviously Fort Frolic is a pretty infamous one, because I think there's a dude in there that you have to. Isn't that right? But anyway, we'll get there.
Yeah,
eventually.
Fort Frolic will be Sander Cohen.
Yeah, right. So then they're all themed, like you said. Every section, though, they're reusing skeletons and animations and such. They're trying to theme. Even the Big Daddies in Neptune's Bounty, I think, is changed to Rosie, called Rosie, kind of the Riveter kind of theme there, and has a rivet gun, and so they're theming the characters around the location. So I mean, the world building is just astounding. Like, there's nothing. I just can't think, other than maybe Arkham, which is similarly aesthetics wise is similar feeling. But like, yeah, this game is just untouchable when it comes to like building a sense of place and having it be so cohesive. Even the audio design in the menu, right? I don't know how much you fooled around, but it's like it's piano keys. Yep. And you're clicking on it, saying ding, 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 and you're just like, I don't feel good about this at all. I don't know, I don't know what's going to happen here, but I don't even like being in the menu, and and it's probably like off key a little bit or whatever, out of tune, but I don't know.
It's plinky. It's slightly distorted, out of tune, slightly, it's rough. It's tough stuff. Yeah, for sure. I find it's interesting you mentioned Arkham, because I was literally thinking that when you were talking about the structure of like how each area has a boss, and I was like, oh my God, this is so like Arkham, which is very similarly scoped. You have all these sort of characters that the still living characters who communicate with you, who seem to know, more or less why you're there. Who knows why? And basically each of the levels is themed around them, and you're going to go encounter them just like a Batman story that involves multiple, like the Arkham games, that involves multiple
rogues gallery
villains. Exactly. And it's funny because it's another thing, pulling in Picasso in particular as being his, Picasso, is maybe had all of his impact, I think, that it was really going to have by this time, by the 50s. I think he was kind of like, all his cubism and stuff was pre-war. But I mean, he had kind of really changed the world as far as art had gone at that time. And then, that's who this guy refers to. Why can't I re-envision what beauty looks like, like Picasso? Why does everything have to be, symmetrical and realism and what have you? Why can't we break away from that? Why two eyes? Really? Do we need two eyes?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so dark. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's this one radio log that you get from him where he's, I don't know, you probably found it, but I'm not being some completely exhaustive, but I'm trying to be. So I think I'm finding, pretty much all of the stuff. But where you're hearing him operating, and there's a nurse with him, and the nurse is like, sort of
no, doctor, she didn't come in for a facelift.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
oh,
you're just like,
grim.
And if you go and look at some of the models' faces up close in that section, like it's complete horror show. In fact, the character aesthetic in general in the game is pretty rough and pretty extreme. So I mean, in a lower fidelity with System Shock 2, we talked about that with the nurses and the cyborg things, even the monkeys, right? So
yeah,
it's in the same vein for sure. It's just lower fidelity back then.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing too, since you're mentioning System Shock 2, and I actually didn't take a note of this, was that I think this may be the first section, might be Neptune's Bounty, where you see a ghost, basically.
Yeah, you see him. Yep, you see ghosts.
An
Two
echo,
ghosts, actually, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. They did that in a System Shock. I totally forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's I'll never forget about that. I told you why I had that
Yeah.
scare.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, that
Yeah. So
always,
that's a direct lift.
that's
yeah.
a direct quote. Yep. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
definitely taking from themselves there for sure. It doesn't happen tons, but it does. There are also parts where he's having flashbacks as well. Very brief snippets. He has a flashback of
I saw one of those.
of his of the plane seat, being in the plane seat again. It happens at one point, and there are others. I think one happens at a level transition, might be the last one. I can't recall. I didn't jot down extensive notes about when things happened. But so they're kind of playing with, that's kind of an addition, but it also is presented in a very similar style. It's not black and white, but it is grainy in the same way. So they're kind of playing with that as well. Well, I think at the end of the Medical Pavilion is when we get the choice for the first time, because you've gone through a tunnel to another little section, and you're coming back, and you have to go around because it's collapsed, basically. It's flooded. So you have to go this other way, and that other direction around takes you to a place where there's a little sister who's being challenged by a splicer,
Right.
because he wants to get at her atom, which is now the whole thing we're going to have to talk about. And you're given what was a big deal at the time, this binary choice. I think that I've kind of, with the choice, I've gone around and around as far as what I think about it. Since I've played this game, I don't know. And in a few years, I'll probably think differently about it again. So that'll be an interesting choice to place I've landed to discuss. But it's basically, you come across these, you learn the relationship about the little sisters and the Big Daddies. The Big Daddies are the protectors. You had seen them before. She calls the Big Daddy Mr. Bubbles. This one's an angel, Mr. Bubbles. when you were knocked out, dealing with the plasmid rewriting your genes in the very first section. And yeah, so do you want to describe what you did, how you harvested her? I assume you harvested her, right?
I did, actually.
Did you?
Which I did, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was obviously a hard decision.
Yep.
And Tannenbaum is in that scene too. Did you mention that already?
No, we kind of mentioned it earlier, yeah, briefly.
Yeah, so she's sort of trying to convince you, and then Atlas is on the other side trying to convince you. So you kind of have these two voices in your head. But yeah, well, the first and only time I finished the game, the first time back in the day when it launched, I did not harvest any of them and saved all of them, and I even to this day forget what you get for that.
You get a different ending.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No. Other than that, I thought there was something.
It.
Oh, okay.
It's fundamentally the only difference, really. I mean because
they allude to in this scene, they allude that Tannenbaum was going to give you something for it, but I didn't.
Right. So it's sort of a false choice in a way, other than the ending, because, and this was something that was this, and this is where I've maybe changed my tune. The basically, if you rescue them, if you harvest them, you immediately get some atom.
Yeah. A lot.
If you rescue them, that atom allotment is basically deferred. You get it later when you.
Oh, okay.
When you've freed a few. So like after each time you've freed a few, you get a group allotment, a gift they say a teddy bear with and in fact it might be slightly more rewarding, but it's deferred. So it's like if you save this one, you won't get all of the atoms she has. I think you get some because you're going to go and you can spend whatever you have right away. And I bought like a health upgrade or maybe a gene tonic or something. I don't remember what specifically I bought the first time, because that doesn't seem as important anymore. But that I remember sparking a lot of debate. Like, well, if it's not harder to be good, like, what's the point of the decision? So where do you come down on that?
Well, I mean, I don't think the difficulty, I don't think the gameplay necessarily has to always relate to the choice from a character perspective. I mean, I don't know. I guess I would want both balanced, and I feel like if you're making, I don't know how many people really will ultimately find out the sort of numerical difference between the two. But if you're just playing once, but I don't know. It's like if the choice that you make, you kind of just have to live with and deal with it. I don't know. It's like, whether you're min-maxing or not, there's still that sort of, I think they're just trying to make it an interesting decision to some degree. Yeah. Did they kind of like, was it a cop out to not have some sort of mechanical differences or systemic differences? Then yeah, probably so. But I don't know. Were they trying to promote playing it twice? I don't know that either. I don't. But I do know that I had never before playing this last session, I had never harvested one, before. And so I didn't even know.
It was only on replaying when I did it as well, because I replayed this game, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. And I didn't either. And it's horrifying.
Yeah. And the little, they're trying to paint a picture of grayness there where it's like they're not really human anymore, and right. It's okay. Atlas says that or whatever, and of course once we find out what's going on there, then he probably has an ulterior motive to all of it anyway, and he's kind of like against Tannenbaum, I assume. I don't remember, but it's horrifying. But also like the whole slug thing, I don't remember. So what happens if you don't harvest, if you save them, does the slug come into play at all, or does she just kind of scurry away into the hole?
So what happens is it's still pretty frightening if you rescue her, at least initially, because you grab her, which is kind of aggressive and threatening, right? And then she doesn't want to be held, and she's like smacking your hand away. It's a really good animation because it's like it's almost a single frame going from her hand like at her chest to like pushing your hand away. It's so fast, so it's so violent, because your hand gets thrust away, and then you force your hand over to her head basically and do this thing which causes her veins all brighten up, like she's like it all like goes bright, and her eyes glow, and then she's just a normal girl. That's right. You basically turn her back, right? Yeah. And then she goes, I mean, she's not entirely.
Does the slug
normal?
Come into?
No, the slug does not come into it.
Because I didn't even know until doing it this time. I didn't even know the slug was a thing, and now I'm listening to these radio logs that I didn't remember because Tannenbaum's talking about finding the slug and like this whole sort of regenerative,
like this guy who used his hand for the first time in 30 years because he touched the sea slug, and she's like, do you have any more? It's very weird,
super weird.
So originally there was no, the original design of the game had no little sisters. It had sea slugs.
Oh no. I didn't remember that. That's so funny.
I was in one of those.
Oh no, that is ringing a bell, right? It was like it was very much like sort of like a meaningless choice because it's a sea slug.
Because who cares, right? It's totally alien. Yeah, and there was no protector, right? It was just this slug.
Well, it's funny because there's also a two part kind of like tension there because even if you're saving her, you still have to take down the little daddy. I mean, the big daddy. And so it's in that case, you're also traumatizing her, because you're killing essentially,
her protector,
right? Who she clearly is very, attached to. So it's kind of bad all the way around. And I guess this time I was just justifying it as sort of like, she seems long gone. Like when you harvest her, she looks she looks and acts very zombie like, so so it's like maybe it's putting her out of her.
It's also, but the thing is that really, and I mean it bothers, this thing that really makes me like question myself is, why did I not pick up on the fact that Atlas was telling me, no, just harvest them, and he was wrong. And it didn't make me question anything else he said. And it should have made me question everything else he said. It's like, I could turn this back into a regular little girl. I mean, if I harvested, whatever, but this could just be a normal person again, a child with a life, and he's been telling me all this stuff, and it never even occurred to me at the time. Like, oh, he's wrong about this one thing. Yeah, like, I don't even think I framed it in that way. And I will say, I think that's down to the voice. He's
endearing. Yeah. He seems
so
like
compelling.
He seems like a good guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He really does.
And you I'm sure you just justified it in terms of like, well, it's just, I probably just don't know the whole story.
And there's these other stories that you run into as well in the audio logs with this, this couple who have, who've killed themselves because they saw their daughter and she's been turned into one and she doesn't recognize them anymore. So there is a sort of reinforcement that they are still other, and because the art style is a little bit strange when it comes to the humans, the splicers of course are grotesque, but it's definitely exaggerated. I mean, and the eyes on these little sisters are like huge, and of course they all look alike, which is a production reality, but also like they've been all molded into something different, maybe, so there's a lot going on with it to make you maybe not think about it. But playing it this time, I'm like, why wasn't this the tip off? Like and for so many people, I still say it wasn't, it mostly passed people by as far as
it did me. I mean, I saved every one in the original playthrough. So it's like, and felt like I was all on track, and that he, maybe, I don't know. I didn't even put two and two together on that. And Tenenbaum, as they are presenting her and building her up, there's definitely suspicion there too. Right?
Yes,
so it's like there's really there's no good guys so far other than Atlas, and so he's the best you can find, I guess.
Right.
And you're like, well, I guess I got to go. Well, of course, the game also forces you to basically do what he says.
You are forced to do what he says. Yes.
So and that's from a mechanical perspective, but that's ends up being the point as well. So it's just fun to hear the "Would you kindly's" peppered in here and there, just very subtly,
with your goals. Yeah. Would you kindly make your way to Neptune's bounty, or whatever, and
Yep.
It's just the way he talks.
Yeah, pretty brilliant stuff there in that decision, which we'll talk about more. And let's see. I think, I mean that was a big, dealing with the Big Daddies. It makes me almost. Makes me just as sad to kill a Big Daddy because I feel like especially because they're passive unless you engage with them and stuff, so it's like,
and they make that moaning sound when
they feel like
they're so melancholy, they're sort of like a Colossus, in Shadow of the Colossus, they're just like, they're not doing anything, if you could just leave them alone, but I don't. And part of it is because there's a UI thing in the if you pause, right, where it's like, this is how many there are on this level. So this is how many are unresolved, and so there's like things that kind of push you into wanting to deal with it. Plus, I mean, you genuinely have to, I think, to think it would be very difficult to go through the game without doing a bunch of them. I think you'd be underpowered, significantly underpowered, because it powers all your plasmid purchases and gene tonics.
I'm sure. Yeah,
get the
but
better
I'm sure
ones,
people
right?
have done it. Yeah, but can you? Let's see. Is there not a trophy for that? Not killing
Gosh,
or harvesting?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Interesting.
Yeah, I will look, because I don't remember, but I can't imagine. I know there's one for like the wrench and all that stuff, but yeah, I don't remember. Okay, I will try to look through this real quickly. There's a bunch of story ones. I think there's basically ones for doing them all, but I don't think there's one for doing none of them. Yeah. There's dealt with every little sister, yeah, and that's it. There's no dealt with no.
Oh, there's not even dealing with one or the other. It's just dealing with them at all.
Dealing with them all is the trophy.
Not how you did it.
Not how you did it. Nope.
Yeah, because you can also mix and match, I guess, right? If you want to.
Oh no, there is a little sister savior. Player has completed the game without harvesting any little sisters, and there is not one, I don't think, for the other.
That's probably very intentional then.
Yep. I think that's. I mean, of course, that came along afterwards. Although maybe the 360 had this stuff.
No, the 360 definitely did. Yeah, in fact, I probably used. I might have gotten 1,000 points when I played it, because I played on 360 when it came out, and played it quite heavily back then. So it's probably one of the few games like Arkham that I would have gotten the equivalent of a platinum on.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah. Well, one thing I didn't mention pre-show that I wanted to hit on a little bit is the music. Not just the underscoring, because like the sort of thriller strings and the punctuation.
Yeah, it's very Bernard Herrmann,
Yeah, and very like the punctuation of the jump scares and the way they use lighting in those moments, and just like that. Yeah, that very, very traditional sort of high strings that happen, but then also Hitchcock. the ambient music that's playing in the world, the world relative music, like on radios and like they have loudspeakers happening all the time, which Arkham basically rips off all of this stuff, right? Because they have the Joker talking to you throughout and on the loudspeakers, and other people, the Riddler. And so, but I mean, just hearing it's also very. Let's see, Fallout 3 was after this.
Yeah,
the
next year, 2008.
Yeah, so just like anyway, the just that sort of classic 50s soundtrack rather than score. It's just it's such a great contrast to everything that's happening, and because that music tends to be so like often so hopeful and happy, makes you toe tapping happy in a lot of ways. There's some melancholy stuff, but largely it's pretty classic 50s big band kind of stuff.
Right. But yeah, I mean that's kind of what our looking back on the 50s is all about, right? Is like, oh, it's this time where you've got all this nostalgia for all this happy music and the happy television that was on and what have you. But it was a dark time in America, right? I mean, and that's how later art largely portrays it, right? I mean, is like, there's this undercurrent of Mother's Little Helper, and I mean, that was even in some of the music that came along in the 60s or whatever, right? The Beatles. Mm-hmm. And not to mention, of course, the racial tensions in America and any number of other, things that were pretty dark about the 50s. Not that things have, I mean, things are better, but also not lots better. There's still a lot of those issues are still with us. Not to get again too political about that stuff, but it is this game is kind of doing that same sort of like gauzy lens, on the entertainment cultural products, and at the same time being like, and here's the horror all around you, with this enclave, that has broken away, the suburbs here, the underwater suburbs of Rapture.
Yeah.
So.
There and I think the one, because I didn't get to play through Arcadia, so you're 1.5 levels ahead of me. But to your point about the suburban sort of underwater suburbia, like it is the other sense of place or world building that I love about it is that each section that you go to feels like a section, something you'd see in a city,
neighborhood,
a neighborhood, and I definitely liked that about it too, and continue to as it goes on. And even though it's not open world, it feels like an interconnected place. And I feel like I guess because there is some retreading back and forth. I think you can go to the bathyspheres most of the time, right, and just go back.
Yeah,
to
you can return a lot of points. There is one point late on where I don't think you're allowed to go back for a while.
Yeah,
and then once you finish it, you're allowed to go back again. So I that's my recollection. But generally speaking, you can, like Half-Life, for example, just turn around and walk back if you want.
Right.
Not that you'd necessarily want to, unless you're going to go back and, you've decided to go back and do you look for stuff or do the Big Daddies and Little Sisters that you didn't, if you don't.
Oh, that's true. Right. Yeah.
Do you have a tendency to do them as you go, or do you kind of leave them be? You do. Yeah.
No, immediately. So far, the 2 or 3, I guess. No, actually, I think it might be 5 up to this point. Well, at least 3 that I've done so far. Yeah,
it's at least 3.
I just go for it. It's like I'm.
Oh yeah, it's like 5. Yeah, because there's like 2 in
Medical
Pavilion, and then 3, I think, in Neptune's Bounty. Yeah.
And I'm essentially, just to play contrasting to what I played before, I'm going full plasmids, which I probably did a combo. What I think I played the first time, other than what I was trying to do for whatever achievements. But my first playthrough was very gun centric, and then specializing in a couple plasmids. And this time I'm just going full plasmids and largely wrench. And then kind of trying to like play evil for lack of a better term, because it's not really a Mass Effect situation, but I'm that's how I'm kind of inwardly role playing it. So, but
so we will have different endings as it turns out.
Well, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I just don't remember. I kind of remember the boss fight at the end, and that's kind of all. I don't remember the story parts of it. Unfortunately, I guess it wasn't memorable enough for me. Oh no, actually something just came to me on the good ending. I just realized what happens. Okay.
Yeah, it's funny because it's a payoff for all the choices you've made, and it's very brief. But it's touching. Yeah. I mean, it's if you take the good ending anyway, I don't know that the other one is meant to be, right? But but the good ending, the quote unquote good ending where you rescue them all is very touching. So I think it's
well, hacking was another thing that we started doing probably a lot in this section.
Yes, we did. There's all kinds of turrets and flying turrets. What do they call the flying things?
Drones. I think
drones.
You can call them drones, but maybe
and cameras. So
cameras, and safes. You can hack safes. You can hack all the vending machines. Like they basically. Yeah, they definitely went into the hacking side of it. And as far as mini games go, like it's always held up as, kind of one of those prototypical, or not prototypical, but kind of typical, hacking games with its Pipeworks kind of feel, but it's just so ironically perfect for this game because of the water theme. And, it's sort of like, it's kind of cheesy, but I buy it because the presentation is pretty good. And it's all the game is about water, it's like, okay. Yeah.
And it's also fun. Like I enjoy the little mini game, it's fun to do it quickly and like trying to find out enough information that a path is going to be decent, because it, depending on what gene tonics you have, security gene tonics you have, you might have more of the overload or alarm dead ends. Basically, if you hit them, the game is over and something bad might happen to you. You either take damage or drones are sent after you. I do love the drones with their little helicopter whirly gig, sort of thing.
Yeah, another good example
really well
of
designed.
Yeah, production design, visual design and audio design for those things. Animation, yeah. They
sound like a lawnmower, as well, which is all of it so good.
Lawnmower or motorbike or something. Yeah, it's just so cohesive, like so cohesive. I would say maybe even more than System Shock, because System Shock 2 definitely borrowed from other, sci-fi tropes, I guess. But this was definitely borrowing from tropes as well, but it's still kind of found its own spin as well, like unexpected spin. When we talked about last episode, but I don't think anyone really fully understood what the aesthetic was they were going for. In Bioshock, we knew about the game, we saw videos. It's like, underwater and kind of, but you didn't really get a full sense of like how cohesive it was until you started playing it. And it's just such a, fresh perspective. Like I said, I think Arkham as an example owes so much to it after the fact, and as many others do. The hacking was, and I'm basically hacking the hell out of everything just because I can, and it's like playing a mobile game. I
hack it all.
Right?
I just do it all. And to the point where it's like, whatever's in that safe I don't actually need. I just want to play the game. Like, I don't really care what's in there.
Right.
To that, I'm basically at that point where I don't usually hack the vending machines, because I'm usually on my way somewhere, and they don't feel like a goal as far as hacking. It's like, oh, that's just where I buy health if I want it. One thing that I will say, playing it this time, that I'm less likely to do is, normally when I play, when I've previously played this game, I'm very slow, methodical, scroungy, don't want to spend health that I don't have to. Like, I'm often maxed out of things, like I can't carry any more of this, that, or the other thing. And this time I'm just like, let's just let her rip. I'm just going to run through, and you know what? You can only carry 500 money or something like that. So I'm just going to buy, health first aid kits at every vending machine. I'm just like, that is not how I normally play a game like this. I'm normally very methodical. I'll pick a lot of stealth stuff because, I like to, be efficient and not use a lot of resources. I have done the wrench run, and gotten the wrench trophy. And that's the way I normally play these sorts of games. So that's another way I'm playing differently. I'm much more guns blazing this time. I'm just shooting my way through as much as possible. The thing I'm tending to do is just picking a gun based on, I can't carry any more ammo for that. Time to switch to that. I've clearly been, storing up a lot of ammo for the machine gun now, so it's time to use the machine gun, and then later I'll switch to the shotgun, and that's been my approach this time.
It's pretty freeing.
The gunplayer, it is very freeing. The gunplay is good enough. I enjoy it. So, I end up taking a fair amount of damage, but it's like, I don't care. So, yeah, you just kind of, trust that it seems like a pretty balanced game. So, I think that's totally fine. I think that's one strength, in fact, that it has over System Shock 2, because we talked about how the end of that game is very brutal, and just, I remember, I don't know, being inside the body of the many and just being like, oh my God, I played some sections multiple times, because I was just getting beaten up. In fact, I don't remember, I'd have to go back and listen. I don't remember. I feel like I got towards the end of that game and had to like cheat because I was just getting worked, or maybe I just found an exploit I think probably I found an exploit in some of those late rooms where I was just like, oh, if I go into this corner, AI can't hit me or find me, and I can just pop out and shoot them. Stuff like that, you know.
This is just a very frictionless game. I mean, I got limited time to play, as I mentioned, but the time that I did play, it's smooth sailing, you know, like it's just very polished and well tuned, like we said, and balanced, and just kind of go through it, you know, and barnstorm through, and it feels fine, you know. And the systems I wanted to mention, we didn't mention this in pre-show, but you're starting to get some of the elemental systems coming in with the plasmids and the environment. You know, the environment, much more so than System Shock 2, is a really important part of the gameplay, which as a level designer I really love, you know, and you can see how that was kind of built. They do a good job at introducing those as well. Like when you get the fire plasmid, you know, you crouch through a puddle of oil, you know, gasoline, and then when you get the plasmid, they present these splicers. I always want to say slicer, but that's I think
Star Wars hackers.
Yeah. But anyway, and then they present them out of the window, and then that trail of gasoline just happens to be underneath them, and you just light it on fire. And so, you know, and so it's just very frictionless in that regard of presenting. And then obviously some of the critical path stuff is like melt the ice so you can use the fire to go through, use the telekinesis to throw a grenade that you don't have at the debris, you know, very, very like well designed. But, you know, as we talk about a lot on the show, kind of integrating those learnings into the game design and level design itself, rather than just pulling up a tutorial screen that says, you can do this. Did you know you could do this? It's like, no, just, you know, make them do it and teach them. And so while, like we said, it's a immersive sim light, but at least it has some of those typical immersive sim elements, no pun intended, like the elemental system and stuff, where surface systems and things. But
like it does tell you about, you know, about doing a lot of them. Like, I mean, it'll tell you use the electricity in this way. Like you know. Yeah. You know, it's immersive sim for
people
who haven't played one. You know,
for people who might be overwhelmed by the praise of the world or what have you, right? As a modern example.
I mean, a good example of that is, you know, you are invulnerable once you pick up a little sister, right? I mean, that's, you know, that would not be true of a true immersive sim, I think, right? That, you know, you would want to choose to do that at the right time, you know, that you knew you had cleared things out, that you had enough time, you know, to deal with that, you know, because the systems might grind up against that problem, you know, and you might be, you know, shot up while you're trying to do that. And I actually picked one up while something was attacking me, you know, and was invulnerable, you know, and saw the whole thing. And then, you know, when it was done, you know, I just was able to get clear, I guess, pretty quickly. So it is, you know, it's kind of weird in that way.
So it's a forgiving
Forgiving is a
game.
good way to put it. Yeah.
Compared to a lot of immersive, like I think even hacking probably in most immersive sims would be dangerous unless you're, you know, and when you hack, I think you're also invulnerable.
Yes.
And in fact, as most of the time when I'm hacking, I can hear somebody yelling at me, you know, it's like while I'm hacking.
Yeah, we talked about that with Thief, right? In Thief, where when you're lockpicking, the world's still going, you know, you're there, you're trying to do it quickly because a guard might literally come around a corner and see you doing it, you know, and that was a distinction there. But I think a lot of that does, it eliminates a lot of friction from the world, and makes players who aren't comfortable with those sorts of things more comfortable and able to just do it. Like, oh, I can do that because I'm, you know, not going to take any damage. Nothing's going to find me. Nothing's going to change, you know, while I do this one thing, you know, which is,
well, they're trying to promote it, right? They want to encourage you to do these things. And so and that's the risk reward kind of pro con of immersive sims. Like they're immersive. So there's going to be things that are not friendly to everybody, every player, especially a broad sense of players. I'm just falling back down a prey hole in my head as we're talking, and I'm just like, oh, That game is so good.
Yes.
I remember this moment and
and Deathloop came out this week or last
I know,
week. So.
Yeah.
Some
We'll
point.
see. Oh yeah, I've definitely played that at some points. The question is how quickly. You had wanted to talk about VO, I think, with the enemies and the VO states.
Maybe this will be the
yeah.
last thing we talk about because we're running long in time. But one of the things I really appreciate about the AI design in this game is how clearly they indicate what state the enemies are in. Like they'll literally say things like "I'm bleeding," which is like, you shot me. So in addition to regular, feedback that they might give, hit effect, hit reacts, and some sort of particle effect or whatever, indicating you've hit somebody, they're also vocalizing most of the states that they're in. And one of the nice things about that is because the enemies are so off the wall, they're humid, so they can communicate with you, but they're insane. So the things that they have to say to you are strange. And that actually pairs really nicely with a system that is just there to communicate what state they're in. Because if they're there muttering about, how they opened up the dog and took the sea slug out, or whatever, that is not a real quote. But if they're muttering about something really strange like that, or, very focused on some small slight somebody did them, you can tell that they're not aware of you.
Yeah.
And then when they are aware of you, it's very clear, but it's also got this character of the world. And it's not what we see a lot in sort of the more military sims is that is a lot drier in a way. It just reinforces the militariness of the world, right? Not anything about the world itself, you know what I mean? It's more about, you're dealing with military characters, just to pick another kind of common bark system, like thinking of a Splinter Cell, for example.
Yeah.
Which also have really good state communication of what the AI is doing, but the voice is very is just drier. And here, because the world is so rich, the things that they can say to communicate these states is also very rich, right? Yeah. And I just really, really appreciate that. They're not doing anything really new in that regard. Like, I mentioned Splinter Cell, but any number of games would have had these sort of, that was what we were doing at the time. We're still doing to some degree, right? Barks, of like, this is what I'm doing. Even the, I think there are vocalizations in Republic Commando, literally, that are like, they're like Trandoshans and whatever saying it, but they are there to signify I've changed state. Like, I know you're there. I've gone into this mode. But here, because the world is what the world is, with these people who are all so badly damaged by what the gene splicing has been doing to their brains, that it just is another way that they can really enrich their world, which I think a lot of the systems do. We've talked about how the UI does it and how, tone is set through some of the stuff that's going on in the Steinman section. We talked about lots of art design choices or art direction choices, production design choices, the hacking, like all of it is enriching the world and feels very cohesive. And I think that the VO of that state system, of an AI state system is also doing that. And it's something that I really particularly noticed this time, playing it a little bit more analytically for the cast. So,
yeah, I think it's, an excellent point. And I think that, an additional sort of perspective on it from me is to what I'm taking away from what you're saying is, bark systems in general are always going to feel wrong for the most part because they're fairly unrealistic, right? Like you can blend them as best as you can, but it's like in most quote unquote photorealistic games that are just trying to create reality, like you mentioned in military games or whatever, like the concept that characters are going to repeat things and kind of say similar things, like you can come up with variations, but generally it's hard to really make it feel natural, right? Because there are gameplay mechanics and systems that are happening. But in this game, they basically have given themselves permission because the characters are clowns. They're basically like wacky, and it's like,
Yeah.
and they're crazy. They're insane, right? They've basically gone insane, and they're unhinged. And so the fact that they would repeat or mutter to themselves or scream at a moment's notice, it's like when you're playing a Splinter Cell game and somebody's coming after you, they're not going to scream at you and say, "I'm going to come get you." They're going to be like, target, blah, 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 blah. I got bogey acquired. Yeah, exactly. So it fits in their aesthetic, but because of that aesthetic, so basically, long story short, like they've chosen an aesthetic that helps them in a lot of ways. It gives them permission to embellish and embrace the nonsensical side of some of the sort of design, especially VO design. Another, like a modern example of basically developers making a really strong decision to help justify how things work in the game. The modern one that I've been using a lot lately is really sort of the Naughty Dog sort of ultimate example of Uncharted versus Last of Us. And, we always would complain, and everyone still does, about, Drake being a mass murderer and all that stuff, right? It's the cognitive dissonance sort of problem. Or what have you, whatever the correct term is. Ludonarrative dissonance. Yeah. So, but then when Last of Us, like the context for survival is completely shifted in the story. And so the fact that, yes, still a brutal game, they're both brutal games technically, but the sort of the gravity of the situation fits better in Last of Us, so there isn't that weird, ludonarrative dissonance that's happening there in that franchise versus Uncharted, even though they're built from the same studio. You know what I mean? So it's like, and in both cases, they're making a decision, right? They made a decision to make a certain kind of game. Now, whether that was part of their motivation or not, probably not. They probably just wanted to make a survival horror game. But at the end of the day, at least it fits better with the decisions you have to make in a design game where you're shooting a lot of things.
Yeah.
So
another one which would say did a really good job of this. That's a stealth. Well, can be played as a stealth game. It kind of has a similar approach to this. As like you can maybe play it as a pretty run and gun or stealth. It doesn't have all the magic. It has gadgets though. Is No One Lives Forever. And that game leans into its stealth aspects by, as you're moving around stealthily, the guards just say the most inane things. They have these long conversations. You'll stop. You'll be stealthing. You're like, well, I got to get past these guys. And you'll just stop and listen because what they're saying is so ridiculous and hilarious. And it's the same sort of thing, giving themselves permission by putting themselves in this sort of spoofy 60s, spy vibe, like James Bond. Well, really more like Austin Powers, really, although not as lowbrow. But it's got a lot of the same comic touch points. They do the same thing, right? Where every guard might have something interesting to say that humanizes those characters. Here it's dehumanizing, so it's kind of going a totally different direction. But I appreciate either of those. I guess it's always one or the other, right? Military is sort of dehumanizing, right? Because they become, they're all the same, right? So it's sort of inherently dehumanizing. I'd love to see more that humanize.
Right.
Anyway, so let's turn to feedback. Let's put a pin in it there. We have plenty of things that we only lightly touched on or did not touch on at all. And we will come back to those because we, of course, only touched on one of the areas as well, and it was very fruitful. So we're going to continue. I'd like to still, if we have time, looks like we have a little time, to hit at least an email, maybe just one. And next time, so you'll need to catch up to me. I'd say let's go when you've gone all the way through Arcadia and come back. So the end of Arcadia, basically the second time.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you can. I mean, I'm behind. But we can push on if we need to push further.
No, that's fine. We can do that chunk. I don't want to.
So our Arcadia Farmers Market, and then Arcadia Revisited,
and then Arcadia again. Actually,
so basically, get to Fort Frolic.
maybe we should do Fort Frolic as well, because I think then.
And Hephaestus.
Yeah, would you be all right? Would you be
Yeah.
all right doing that? Okay.
Yeah, I
let's
just
do
need
that.
to
Let's
chip
do
away
Fort
at it.
Frolic as well. Yeah, a little bit more actively this
time.
week.
Yeah. So we're gonna finish Fort Frolic, or
Correct.
Do you go back to
Yes.
Fort Frolic? No, you just go there once. It looks like.
Yeah, you only have to go there once. I mean, you could backtrack just because you can backtrack, but yeah, you're only going there once.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll finish that.
Cool. All right, that is what we'll do for next time. So let's turn to feedback. We've had several emails. We'll catch up on them to devgameclub@gmail.com. You, sir, have one from Artemage.
Yep. Let me. Did I just? Nope. Here it is. Okay. Subject regarding Bioshock, shifting tone and atmosphere from Artemage. Hello, devs. Welcome to the beginning of the new era for you guys, anyway. Yes, you've expanded to the 7th home console generation. This opens up a whole new world of possibilities, and I think that is a great start. Now, I'm presuming you've both played through this before from the discussion you had when announcing it on the show. If I'm wrong, would you kindly skip this email until you've gotten to the face-to-face meeting with Andrew Ryan? I'm resisting something. I don't know what it is. I'm trying to push back.
Are you reaching for a club?
I've just rolled my save on concentration, and I've succeeded. Now that we've gotten to the point in the game, we need to look back from. I want to know what you guys think went on in the design of this game to make these changes so drastic. It's clearly a matter of, as you increase in power and capability, you are made to take on more. When you come up to Rapture, in the bathysphere, you are made to watch a splicer eviscerate someone before a drone chases it off. You are soon after trapped waiting for an elevator as a group of maybe half a dozen, if that many. I'm writing this before my reply, I admit. Splicers are attempting to get to you, and there's a major tension and presentation that this is a certain death. But the game goes on. You obtain more Adam, and soon a ballroom full of splicers is just a night of slam dancing. So the shifts in tone are very apparent. You start off trying to stay out of sight, avoid interactions, navigate the city, and just get to your goals. You take all of the steps you can take to put yourself at best advantage, as though this were a stealth game with an instant kill mechanic a la Tenchu. But before too long, the enemy is just an obstacle you can easily knock out of your way and keep on moving. Your plasmids and firearms basically make you a walking arsenal, and there's nothing that could reasonably stop you as long as you're halfway intelligent. Depending on your difficulty, I guess. Do you feel this tone shift was a matter of intent or a result of lack of focus? I'm not criticizing either way, just wondering what the impression is from other industry professionals not involved with this game's development. Good to write to you guys again. Take care and stay safe. Artemage.
Thanks, Artemage. I mean, I think it is a shooter first and anything else second. And so it's a power fantasy. And therefore, I think it's very intentional. And in fact, I think the fact that you feel so underpowered at the beginning, even though you're really not, right, relative to the challenges, it just makes you, like, you're sort of a little behind the curve. You're a little bit more in danger, but you're not really in that much danger. You know, it makes that power curve feel even bigger, right? Yeah. That you're even more powerful by the time you get to the point. You know, we haven't really gotten to the point in the game yet that he's talking about. Although I'm already to a point where I've got lots of plasma. I'm never at a loss for resources of any kind. Like, I already feel like a superhero, and I don't even have, you know, some of the best plasmids or some of the best gene tonics or what have you. But I already feel like, you know, there's nothing that this game can throw at me that I'm not going to be able to take on. You know, I don't die, it's all pretty easy peasy. I mean, of course, played it before, et cetera, but I do think that that's basically what it's very intentional that this is going to be a power fantasy. Yeah, that's my thoughts. I don't know if you feel differently.
No, I'd have the same response. Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is a very, as opposed to say maybe, I mean, I'm going to kind of make up some on the fly terms here maybe, but as opposed to a true immersive sim that is not necessarily an additive design sort of design where it's meant to kind of just give you more and more and more. It's more meant to be like, what direction are you going to go? And then, are you going to augment that direction by specializing in different things or whatever? But generally in those games, you can't do everything. You can't choose everything. And I think in this game, you probably can't ultimately choose everything, but this is very much like they're just piling more and more and more on you because, yeah, it is a power fantasy. And I think, and I would actually say thematically so far, and it's been a while, so I don't remember how far this goes thematically, but so far thematically, they're kind of even presenting you as a superhero. They're kind of presenting you as someone special who is having their genes rearranged, and using all of these plasmids. Somebody, people refer to you as an angel, and that kind of stuff. And so, I think they're leaning into that to some degree. How do when they say parasite, are they referring to you when the splicers are talking about a parasite?
No, parasites are the people who are, who hang on to society, right? I mean, parasites.
Oh, okay. Because I feel okay. All right, yeah. So they're.
It's just something they say all the time. It's a very common. Yeah. It's a
related
it's
to
a. Yeah, it's a way to other and dehumanize your opponent, right? Is to call them a parasite, right?
Yeah,
just like
taking
like snowflake or whatever these days. It's like
Yeah, but no, I mean I think it is. Yeah. Anyway, I agree with Brad. I think it is intentional, but I think their goal was different than maybe say System Shock 2.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think too that they're trying to also accentuate the player, the player's natural arc, right? The player comes in, they don't know anything. It's kind of scary. What's going on? I don't understand anything that's happening. And that's literally the same thing that's happening to the character that they play. Like, oh, thank God I've met this guy who's going to, tell me what to do. He's going to direct me. Oh, it's so helpful. And then they're going to turn that on its head. Spoilers, etc. Like, I feel like it's the arc, and it's a very natural arc, right? I mean, it's why we have things like the hero's journey, whatever, chosen one stories, etc. Is that it's just a very natural, compelling, simple arc, right? And it's there's nothing wrong with doing that at all. I mean, obviously that's very successful, and it was very successful for this game. I think that the level of polish here is a real big step up for them, from System Shock 2, and I think that helps them amazingly, as some of the stuff we've already talked about here. But I do think they're borrowing from a well-known blueprint, right? Of you get more stuff and all that stuff just gets better and better and better. And yes, you can choose how to do different things, but there isn't like a challenge necessarily to doing that. It's just like, which way do you want to be powerful is more of the question you're asking yourself at any one point, Anyway, thank you for that, Artemage. We've got more emails, like I said, and we're going to get to them. Thank you for sending that to devgameclub@gmail.com. But we want to give Tim a chance to move on to his streaming this evening. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub. Or you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
As I mentioned, you are trying to take a little control of your environment, and you've been streaming over twitch.tv/Tim Longo Jr. with that same JR at the end. How are you finding that so far?
So far, so good. I'm loving it. I mean, it's a very, very well put together game, and very clear of focus and vision for what it's trying to do. And it is, I'm a big X-Files fan and conspiracy theory fan in general, and it's got just a tone and kind of aesthetic that I really love so far. I'm enjoying it. I'm only 2 hours in, but and I don't know. I'm enjoying it enough where I might try to add in a day or some ad hoc days here or there. So keep an eye out on Twitter if you're interested. Other than the Monday nights that I do, just so I can get through it faster. But so far so good. Yeah, I'm excited to play some more tonight.
Cool. Well, enjoy it. I got the platinum on that game since starting.
Yeah, that's right.
I've been very busy. I had a lot of control this week, and now I'm out of control, as it were. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo is by Mark Garcia. Have fun leaping at shadows at your doctor's office this week, and good night.
Good night.
Quite literally.
Yeah.
And there's that one creepy moment. Ugh.
Yeah, they have really good jump scares, especially like turning lights out or having the mist or the frost or mist.
The fogger thing.
Fog in your it's very good.